Coronation Street's Will Driscoll walks straight into a trap set by Megan Walsh next week, after she poses as one of his old running friends from Hull. What does Megan want from the vulnerable teenager? In the Freshco car park, Will waits around for his pal Lee, who he has arranged to meet up with via text. However, when Megan shows her face instead, it dawns on Will that he's been duped into facing his abuser. How horrifying for Will. He's under the impression that he's going to have a catch-up with one of his friends from Hull, then Megan suddenly appears behind him, explains our Corey insider. Will is well aware of how dangerous Megan is, so it's not difficult to imagine how frightened he must feel. The question is, what on earth does Megan have to say to him? Keep your fingers crossed that Will shuts down whatever poison she is bound to come out with. The week kicks off with Will confiding in Hope Dobbs that he's thinking about packing in athletics, as it reminds him too much of Megan and all the trauma he went through with her. Eager to stand by her new mate, Hope insists to Will that if he stops pursuing his passion, he's letting Megan have control over him and allowing her to stifle his natural talent. Could Hope's advice change Will's mind, or is he about to abandon the sport that he's dedicated so much of his life to? Hope and Will have a really lovely budding friendship, continues our spy. After hearing Will out, Hope is keen to make him realize that he needs to stick to athletics and not let Megan have any impact on his future. You have to admit that's wise words coming from a 15-year-old, let alone Hope. Later in the week, Will explains to Hope that he's received a text message from one of his close buddies Lee, who wants to hang out in Weatherfield. Subsequently, Will heads off to meet Lee, but once he arrives at the meeting point in town, he finds himself face to face with Megan. As Will realizes that he's been lured back into Megan's orbit, will the teenager stand his ground and dismiss her? Or will Megan find a way to worm her way back into Will's life? In the cobbled heart of Weatherfield, where secrets never stayed buried for long, a new storm was quietly brewing, one that no one saw coming, and certainly not Will. Megan had always been good at blending in. To most people on the street, she was just another familiar face, polite smile, steady job, nothing particularly remarkable. But beneath that calm exterior was a mind always working, always calculating. And lately, every calculation had led her to one conclusion. Will had to be dealt with. Not in the dramatic, explosive way the street was used to, no shouting in the Rover's return, no police cars screeching down the cobbles. Megan's approach was far more dangerous. She didn't destroy people in public. She dismantled them in private. And Will, whether he knew it or not, had walked straight into her carefully laid web. It started with something small. A missing message. A misdirected call. A coincidence that felt harmless at first glance. Will had brushed it off, assuming it was just one of those modern-day glitches everyone experienced. But Megan had been there every step of the way, gently nudging reality off course. She made sure he accidentally overheard conversations that were never meant for him. She ensured he saw fragments of information, never the full picture, just enough to make him doubt what he already believed. Doubt, Megan knew, was the most powerful weapon of all. Will had begun changing. Subtly at first. He became more cautious, more suspicious of those around him. He started second-guessing friends, replaying conversations in his head, searching for hidden meanings that weren't there before. And all the while, Megan stayed close, comforting, reassuring, always the one person who seemed steady when everything else felt uncertain. "You're overthinking it," she told him one evening as they stood outside the cafe. The streetlights flickered softly above them, casting long shadows across the pavement. "You've just got a lot going on." Will sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Maybe. It just feels like something's not right lately." Megan tilted her head sympathetically. "Or maybe you're just finally noticing things you used to ignore." It was a perfect line. Gentle. Supportive. And completely misleading. Because Megan wasn't just influencing Will's perception, she was building an entire narrative around him. A story where he couldn't trust his friends. Where his instincts were the only thing he could rely on. And most importantly, a story where Megan was the only safe constant. But safety, in Megan's world, was just another illusion. Behind the scenes, she was setting the final pieces into place. The trap wasn't physical. It never was. Megan wasn't interested in locks or basements or dramatic confrontations. Her trap was social, psychological, a carefully engineered collapse of Will's world from the inside out. She began by planting doubts in others. A casual comment to a neighbor. A carefully twisted retelling of something Will had said in confidence. Nothing obvious, nothing traceable, just enough to shift perception. Soon, people around Will started treating him differently. Conversations grew shorter. Invitations stopped coming. Smiles became strained. Isolation, Megan understood, made people predictable. And Will was becoming very predictable. One rainy afternoon, he finally confronted her. "You've noticed it too, haven't you?" he asked, frustration breaking through his usual restraint. They stood under the shelter of the ginnel, rain hammering the pavement beyond. "People are acting strange. Like they've heard something about me." Megan didn't hesitate. She never did. "That sounds awful," she said softly. "But are you sure it's not just paranoia? You've been stressed lately." "It's not paranoia," Will insisted. "Something's being said. I just don't know what." This was the moment Megan had been guiding him toward. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Okay. I didn't want to say anything because I wasn't sure myself. But I've heard things too." Will's eyes sharpened. "What things?" Megan hesitated just long enough to make it believable. "People talking. About you. About things you've supposedly done." I didn't want to believe it. The silence that followed was exactly what she needed. Will's trust in the world cracked a little more. "And you didn't tell me," he said quietly. Megan looked genuinely pained. "I didn't want to upset you without proof. I thought it might just be gossip." That word, gossip, was the final hook. Because now Will had something to chase. Something to uncover. Something he could no longer ignore. And Megan knew exactly where he would go looking. She had already arranged it. The next stage of her plan involved a message. An anonymous tip sent from a burner account, carefully worded to suggest that everything Will suspected could be traced back to a specific source. A place. A conversation. A moment in time that didn't actually matter, but would seem important enough to investigate. It led him exactly where she wanted. To an encounter that would never fully add up. A half-truth spoken by someone who didn't even realize they were being manipulated into the story. By the time Will arrived at the back room of the builder's yard that evening, Megan was already there. Waiting. That alone should have warned him. But by now, Will was too deep in the maze she had built. Every turn he took only confirmed what Megan wanted him to believe, that he was uncovering something real, something hidden, something dangerous. "You came," Megan said softly, almost approvingly. "You told me to," Will replied, eyes scanning the dim room. "You said I'd find answers here." Megan nodded slowly. "I said you might. I didn't want to push you into anything." Will frowned. "Then why are you here?" This was it. The pivot. Megan stepped closer, her expression calm, almost sad. "Because I didn't want you to find out alone." A pause. Then she dropped the final piece. "I think someone's been setting you up, Will." The words landed heavily. Will's voice tightened. "Setting me up, how?" Megan exhaled, as though carrying a burden she could no longer hold. "All the rumors. The distance from people. The things you've been hearing. It's not random. It's organized." His mind raced, trying to connect fragments that suddenly felt intentional. "And you know who?" he asked. Megan looked at him for a long moment. The silence stretched just long enough to feel like truth forming. Then she said it. I think it's someone close to you. That was the trap snapping shut. Because now Will wasn't just confused. He was afraid. And fear, once fully rooted, always demanded action. What are you saying? He asked. That I should confront them. Megan shook her head gently. No. I'm saying you need to be careful. If they realize you're onto them, they'll twist everything again. Will swallowed hard. Then what do I do? For the first time, Megan allowed herself the faintest hint of a smile. You let me help you, she said. And just like that, the final chain clicked into place. Will wasn't just isolated anymore. He wasn't just confused or suspicious. He was dependent. Over the following days, Megan tightened her control with precision. She guided his decisions subtly, steering him away from allies and toward confrontation. Every time he doubted her, she had an answer ready. Every time he tried to step back, she made sure something happened to pull him forward again. A missed call from a friend at the exact wrong time. A conversation overheard at just the right angle. A coincidence so perfect it felt engineered, because it was. And all roads led back to one conclusion Megan had planted from the start. Someone was betraying him. The final stage of her plan wasn't destruction. It was revelation. She wanted Will to believe he had uncovered the truth himself. That when everything collapsed, it would feel like his own discovery, not her manipulation. Because that was the beauty of Megan's method, her victims never saw her as the source. Only the solution. On the night everything was set to culminate, Megan met Will one last time on the street. The wind was sharp, carrying the distant hum of traffic and the glow of streetlights flickering on wet cobbles. Are you ready? She asked. Will nodded slowly. There was something different about him now. Hardened. Focused. Convinced. I know what I have to do, he said. Megan studied him carefully. Just remember, you're not alone in this. That was her final lie. As Will walked away, heading toward the confrontation Megan had orchestrated from the very beginning, she stood still under the dim streetlight, watching the outcome of her plan unfold exactly as intended. In Weatherfield, truths always came out eventually. But sometimes, they were written by the very person exposing them. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Crown ST.